You've no home planet, no influence, nothing. You're just a pathetic bunch of tin soldiers skulking about the galaxy in an ancient spaceship.
It says a lot about Revenge of the Cybermen that it is probably more well known for the mishaps that went on during its filming than for anything that actually happens in the story. Coming as it does right off the back of Genesis of the Daleks, considered by many to be the greatest classic Doctor Who serial of all time, and being another something of the something story featuring the other major villain of the show, there is a case to be made that Revenge of the Cybermen was always destined to pale in comparison and be overlooked by fans. However, I would argue that there is more to it than that. Revenge of the Cybermen is the last Doctor Who story to be penned by Cybermen co-creator Gerry Davis, albeit with extensive rewrites by script editor Robert Holmes. The basic plot is that the Cybermen have released a plague, killing most of the inhabitants of the Nerva Beacon, and they plan to use the survivors to blow up Voga, the planet of gold, because as it turns out, Cybermen are allergic to gold, and their totally logical and not bonkers solution to this problem is not to build some sort of filter into their breathing apparatus, but to instead destroy all gold in the universe. Not only that, but they're so determined to succeed that if their first plan fails, then they'll revert to their backup plan, which is to load the beacon up with explosives and smash it into Voga. Yeah, the Cybermen really hate gold. Incidentally, the Nerva Beacon is also the setting of another Season 12 serial, The Ark in Space, which takes place in the far future. There's no real narrative justification for revisiting the same location. It is literally just to save on budget by allowing the same sets to be reused. Indeed, you could even argue that it deflates the tension of the final episode, as we've already seen the Nerva Beacon in the future and we know that it doesn't get destroyed. However, it is not lack of original set design which ultimately makes Revenge of the Cybermen so forgettable. Mr. TARDIS once described Legend of the Sea Devils as having nothing on its mind, and I'd argue that Revenge of the Cybermen is basically the classic series equivalent of that. Despite featuring the Cybermen, a villain which tapped into all of the paranoias of the time about the advancement of human technology, incidentally, if you want to make the Cybermen relevant in 2024, do something involving AI, but I digress. The story is absolutely devoid of any thematic substance. It has no social commentary, nothing to say about anything, and consequently, although there are some pretty big action set pieces, especially in episode 4, it all feels a bit meaningless. Probably the biggest missed opportunity is the segment of the story set on Voga, which has mainly just become notorious for the numerous bizarre mishaps and incidents that went on during on-location filming at Wookiee Hole Cavern. These include alleged ghost sightings, members of the production crew falling ill or injuring themselves, and an incident involving a motorboat that nearly claims the life of Sarah Jane Smith actor Elizabeth Sladen. I don't want to get into all of that too much here, but the whole sequence of events is honestly pretty interesting and has been documented extensively elsewhere. I'll put a link up to a Josh Snares video if you're curious. From a storytelling point of view though, there's a lot of thematic potential in the concept of a civilization that live on a planet entirely made of gold, and yet Revenge of the Cybermen really does nothing with that potential. There's a generic political power struggle going on with the Vogans, as some of them want to stay safe and hidden under the surface, while this one called Vorus is leading a rebellion who want to destroy the Cybermen with a missile, but it feels like the decision to make one of the most precious metals on Earth be the equivalent of kryptonite to Cybermen was made completely arbitrarily. Now, not every piece of fiction needs to have gripping themes or social commentary in order to work. I mentioned when we reviewed Pyramids of Mars how that is another serial with very little on its mind, and yet it is effective because it has an extremely dangerous and intimidating villain, and so the stakes are very high. Which brings me to the other main failing of Revenge of the Cybermen, which is that the Cybermen are just not very threatening. Part of the problem, as many others have already alluded to, is with Tom Baker's performance, and the fact the Doctor spends much of the runtime undermining and taking potshots at the Cybermen, including the infamous pathetic bunch of tin soldiers line. It also doesn't help that the Cybermen are generally just very ineffectual in the story, like how instead of marching onto the beacon and taking it by force, they feel the need to lurk in the background, using human double agents and releasing plagues. I think what the writers were possibly going for here was to make the Cybermen into this ancient mythical threat, supposedly once defeated long ago but about to be resurrected. And that could have really worked on a meta level, with it being being 6 years since the Cybermen last appeared on screen, but unfortunately having the Doctor mock the Cybermen for skulking about in an ancient spaceship just doesn't quite hit the mark, and instead makes them come off as incompetent. Perhaps what the story could have really benefited from is a Pyramids of Mars style flash forward into alternate time, where the Doctor and companions travel back to where they left the TARDIS in the Ark in space, only to find that the Nerva Beacon no longer exists and the Cybermen have now conquered the galaxy. Not only would that dramatically raise the stakes during the climactic final scene where the beacon is hurtling toward Voga loaded with explosives and with the Doctor and Sarah on board, but it would justify reusing the same location and tie everything together into a proper season finale. At the end of the day though, it's all very well speculating on how Revenge of the Cybermen might have worked, and if you really want to go down that route, there is an alternate version of the serial that already exists, based on Jerry Davis's original unrevised script, which some consider to be a significant improvement. But the fact remains that the version that actually made it to broadcast is just not very inspiring. Genesis was always going to be a tough act to follow, but by comparison, this is the very definition of a damp squib. It has nothing interesting to say, the main villains are not remotely intimidating, and most of the stuff on Voga is just extremely forgettable. And that is the reason why Revenge of the Cybermen ultimately faded into obscurity. I'm Midnight, and I travel in time and space. And trains. If you would like to support this channel, don't forget to head over to my eBay store Cult Coven, linked in the description below, where I sell books, media and other nerdy things. Send a message with your order and you can get a shout out in a future video. Thank you.